PackersTalk.com.
Do you want to experience the thrill of a Packers game at Lambeau Field? If so, be sure to get your guaranteed authentic tickets from theticketking.com, a longtime trusted source and local Green Bay business. Just go to PackersTalk.com/tickets for more information and ticket links. That's PackersTalk.com/tickets.
You're listening to No Huddle Radio on the Packers Talk Radio Network, your home for in-depth and thoughtful Packers analysis. I'm your host, Gil Martin. My co-host is my good friend, Sean Tien. And in addition to this show, I host Locked On NHL, while Sean was a TV sportscaster in Minnesota. We're here to talk Packers because you're all here for one thing, and that's a love for Green Bay football. Sean, it is a busy week in the NFL for the offseason, combine week. Your thoughts as we take the next step in this offseason?
Seems busier than usual, right, Gil? And thankfully, this time it's a leap year and it's a leap day, so you get that extra day in 2024. It's that time though where it's draft season. This is the gathering information period of gathering the medicals, getting some testing done in Indianapolis this week with the NFL scouting combine. And a lot of guys who are not participating in the combine, who are probably going to go really high in the draft, we'll see them probably on their pro days. That's obviously going to be well publicized. But a lot of excitement going into the year, especially with the team like the Packers, who have a lot of draft capital in April.
Yeah, I love 5 picks in the top 100.
Mm-hmm.
You have the flexibility to move up, to trade back, to trade one of those picks for a veteran player if you want to go that route. So Brian Gutekunst certainly has a lot of options on the table. And now the question becomes, what's he going to do with all of that draft capital?
Yeah, and before we even get to that, Gil, free agency is a couple weeks away, the start of free agency. And the big thing that's going to be coming up the next 13, 14 days, what's he going to do with David Bakhtiari, the offensive tackle for the Packers, who, when he's healthy, man, is a Hall of Fame left tackle. He's an all-pro player. He's arguably the Packers' best offensive player, maybe overall, when he's healthy. But the Packers, even though the NFL, every team, the salary is increasing by $30+ million going into next year, and that helps the Packers. They've restructured some contracts like Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith this week. That's saving them about $7 million against the cap for the 2024 season. But David Bakhtiari's got a pretty big cap figure, and Brian Gutekunst has got a pretty big decision to make, Gil.
Yeah, he does. And look, it is not reasonable to expect the Green Bay Packers to pay more than $40 million to a guy who over the last 3 seasons has played a total of 13 games. And with his knee a big question mark, it's just not a realistic expectation, especially when they could save more than $20 million off the cap if they let him go. And then there's, I think with him, it doesn't matter whether it's pre or post June 1, but you're not going to keep him at that rate. So the question becomes, do you restructure? Do you ask him to sign, a completely different deal altogether? Or are you going to try to trade him or let him go? And, there's little ramifications of each option as to when you get the relief from the cap, if you get the relief from the cap.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing I cannot see is David Bakhtiari coming to training camp on this same contract with a cap hit of over $40 million.
And the thing is, you mentioned that cap hit where it could be a dead cap hit about, I believe, 19-20 million if the Packers do indeed cut him or trade him, whatever it may be. Hey, they took the bullet on a $40 million dead cap hit with Aaron Rodgers last year, arguably the greatest Packer in franchise history statistically. And they wouldn't be afraid to do that with David Bakhtiari either. I feel like I read though his cap hit is set to be $40 million once the new league year hits in March. Ideally for the Packers. Now I'll say this, where if Rasheed Walker didn't look so good, especially the back half of the 2023 season, I would be begging the Packers, don't let Bakhtiari walk. Even though even though if he's not healthy, you still don't have a solution at left tackle. I feel like the Packers have a solution at left tackle right now with a young guy like Rasheed Walker, who we talked about obviously last week, Gil, how impressive he was, especially after he got benched against the Rams during the middle part of the season last year. I love Bakhtiari, but you mentioned it, 13 games in the last 3 years after that freak knee injury that he had, that torn ACL he had on New Year's Eve of the 2020 season, a year where I felt like the Packers were going to win a Super Bowl if he was on the field. I just feel like the Packers are bound to win the Super Bowl that season. But yeah, the Packers, they could save more than $20 million by letting him go this year. Ideally, I hope, though, with Bakhtiari, I hope they can get a trade done because that would be the best. Just get something for him. You know what I mean? Just get something for him because maybe a team will see value. And then if that team sees so much value, the New York Jets, Aaron Rodgers team, if they see so much value, hopefully they can waive a physical designation because you don't know. It's like with that knee, he's had so many issues, Gil. Does he even pass a physical? That's just, there's so many questions. And as much as I love the guy, as talented as he is, it's time. It is simply time.
It is, and it's a shame because he has been such a great Packer, both on and off the field. And I mean, he's a surefire Packers Hall of Famer. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Yeah.
But had he stayed healthy, he was on track to possibly be a pro football Hall of Famer, not just be enshrined in Green Bay, but in Canton. Now he probably needs at least one or two more Pro Bowl caliber seasons to get to that point. And I don't know if his knee will let him do that. And the amazing thing about Bakhtiari to me, you look back at the last couple of years, I don't think he practiced at all.
No.
Ever.
He's that good. He doesn't have to.
And he just shows up and
doesn't have to.
And you look at his Pro Football Focus grades and you look at what he does on film with the eye test. He's still darn good in spite of the fact, playing at an elite level, in spite of the fact that he's unable to practice. He's playing with a knee that swells up every time he crosses the street. And yet he goes out there and just does a really, really good job. It is hard to let go of him, but unfortunately, unless he's willing to restructure that contract, I can't see any other solution.
Playing left tackle in the NFL has got to be one of the hardest jobs. It has to be for in professional sports. David Bakhtiari makes it look like riding a bike. It's just that it just comes so natural to him, and he's so good again when healthy. But it's a bummer because, and I know a lot of people are upset where it's like, oh, the Packers shouldn't have signed him to that record-breaking contract in November 2020. But guess what? You don't know what's going to happen after that. You don't, because if he would have entered free agency, he would have gotten that and maybe even more money. At the time, it was a record-breaking deal, and he deserved it. He earned that money. And Trent Williams broke it a few months later by making, I think, just $1 million more in the contract in total money, which was kind of funny. That's just the way the NFL operates now, where it's like one guy will have a record-breaking deal one day, and someone's going to break the record maybe a day later or something like that. Right. But with David Bakhtiari, the guy earned that contract, and I know, obviously, hindsight's 2020. You don't know what's going to happen. What if he doesn't sign that contract and the Packers win the Super Bowl and he doesn't get hurt? It's like the demand for him goes up and his price tag would have went up too. You don't know what's going to happen, and it's going to be interesting though because Brian Gutekunst, he did talk at the combine, the Packers GM, and Brian Gutekunst was the guy who personally scouted David Bakhtiari when he was going in the draft process and everything like that. And Gutekunst, you hear the story where I think I remember years ago where Ted Thompson talked about how John Dorsey, who had GM stops in Kansas City and Cleveland and is a very well-respected executive, was pounding on the table when he was just a young scout in Green Bay for Terrell Davis. Terrell Davis was a Hall of Fame running back, and Terrell Davis was right. I feel like Brian Gutekunst was the same for David Bakhtiari, and that's that kind of personal connection. For Brian Gutekunst, he was very coy the other day talk about where, hey, no decision's been made because I don't have to make a decision right now. This is even though it's a business, the NFL, I think this is a very personal thing for Brian Gutekunst. He wants to make sure all options are exercised before he absolutely is 100% certain on the decision. He makes a 100% decision. It's just, they're people too. And it's got to be tough. It's got to be tough.
Yeah, and look, Bakhtiari has given this team everything he's had. I mean, I think back to 2022, where he played 11 games, missed 6 games because of an emergency appendectomy, and still came back for the season finale when he didn't have to do that.
Nope.
And the playoffs were on the line, and unfortunately, obviously, the Packers did not win that game. But, he's all in, and he deserves respect for everything he's given to this team over the last decade. The injuries are not his fault. He didn't choose to hurt his knee. He didn't choose to have complications. He's worked his rear end off to rehab and get back and done as much as he could. Sometimes, stuff happens. And it seems like, maybe he's willing to take an incentive-laden deal to stay in Green Bay, to restructure with a lot of, if you play this many games, you will get this much money. With the knowledge that he may not play any games. So, but I will say this. If David Bakhtiari is healthy and able to play, and this is the last year of his deal, I'm fairly confident to say that for this year, he will give you a higher quality of play than any alternative on the Packers roster right now, just for this 1 year.
Yeah, and that's, if they want to go all in, maybe they just put their chips in the table and they say, hey, why not? We're going to run it back. We have a little extra money we can work with. We're going to bring him back for the final year, and it's either this year was his last year or next year is going to be his last year. He's not going to be in Green. His days are numbered in Green Bay. But it's like Ted Thompson said, the late Ted Thompson said, where the good Lord only made so many great offensive tackles and so many great linemen and men that size. You do what you can to make sure you have those guys, and then you hold on to those guys. So it's probably just a lot of negotiating. You got to think there's a lot of negotiating going on between Brian Gutekunst, between David Bakhtiari's agent. It's just going to be an interesting situation and see what is going to happen. I feel like down the road, though, Gil, David Bakhtiari is going to have a similar treatment to Sterling Sharp when it comes to debating for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The big thing with Sterling Sharp, why he's not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, is because he didn't play long enough. But when he played, he dominated, and he absolutely was just a force out there. David Bakhtiari, when he's played, he's dominated. He's shut down opponents. He's shut down opposing edge rushers. He's the best pass-protecting left tackle in football when he is healthy. And I feel like that's going to be an argument down the road for the Pro Football Hall of Fame discussion. He's that good. He's that great. And I know Packer fans, there are a lot of Packer fans who who have no problem being like, yep, see you later. And we don't need you anymore. But losing him, it's going to hurt. But it's something where the Packers are bigger than any one player. And eventually this organization does move on. They know how to move on. They've done it before. They'll do it again.
Yeah, they will. Look, that's part of the business. That's part of the game. NFL stands for not for long, and very, very few people play 10 years, let alone longer than that. And very few of those players play for one team for 10 years. So things do change, unfortunately, sometimes, and fortunately for others. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
We've been lucky with David Bakhtiari. I just want, no matter what happens, I just want people to know that we've been lucky with David Bakhtiari. We're probably going to be talking about him a couple weeks later, Gil, because when free agency opens up, I guarantee we'll have some news one way or another. But Brian Gutekunst, though, we mentioned that he talked at the scouting combine on Tuesday in Indianapolis. A few things that stood out to me, Gil, was him talking about the quarterback spot and him talking about the kicking position, specifically Anders Carlson. What stood out to you about Gutekunst's presser outside the David Bakhtiari stuff? What else stood out to you about Brian Gutekunst, what he had to say on Tuesday?
A few things. Definitely the kicking situation, as you mentioned, was one of them. But besides the two that you mentioned, the fact that he kind of hinted that he might be willing to just go with young guys at safety, to just draft a couple of guys and like see where the chips fall, like the way they handled the tight ends and receivers last year. Do the same thing with safety this year. Draft 2, maybe 3 guys, or bring in a low-cost free agent, a moderately priced free agent, and just let these guys play and grow together and rebuild the position. That way, everyone's expecting him to bring back at least one of the 3 guys who were there last year, whether it's Jonathan Owens or Rudy Ford or Darnell Savage. So, that to me was a little bit of a surprise. Not a shock, but a little bit of a surprise.
You wonder if old pal Micah Hyde is going to get a call. And because I think he's past his prime, but that would be a darn good veteran presence to have in Green Bay, I feel. And if Buffalo isn't bringing him back, Buffalo now, they're in the midst of that Josh Allen big quarterback money. And they got to be careful with contracts. They got to be kind of finicky. And Micah Hyde, I wouldn't mind giving him a call. I think that was a big mistake by Ted Thompson when he let him go at the end of his time in Green Bay. But Micah Hyde could come back, have a little renaissance tour, and be a big addition to a young Packers secondary and provide some leadership on that back end. I will say the good thing with Gutekunst, I mean, he did talk about Anders Carlson, where he's going to have competition in camp, most likely this upcoming training camp this summer, which is good. That's Carl. He didn't really, and I was okay with Anders Carlson not really being any competition for him, mainly because the Packers were all in on being super young. They were all in on the youth movement. But it's just crazy to think, because no one thought this team would even crack the playoffs. People thought the Packers would be picking in the top 5 coming up in April this year. Yet they were a somewhat underperforming kicker away from possibly playing for an NFC championship. And that is just nuts to me. And Anders Carlson, we talked about his numbers were actually better his rookie year than Mason Crosby's were his first 4 years in Green Bay. And everybody loves Mason Crosby because he had such a strong career overall. He made a lot of big kicks, but competition is going to be needed. You wonder, though, it's like, do you draft a kicker? I don't think so, but you got to find someone in undrafted free agency.
Yeah, and there should be plenty of guys to choose from. Look, they already added a kicker who's going to compete at least in minicamp and in OTAs. But you got to bring it. I couldn't imagine spending a draft pick on a kicker at this point after doing it last year, when you can find a lot of kickers. And hopefully Carlson gets things straightened out. And, the one thing you mentioned, his numbers are better than Mason Crosby's numbers were early in his career. That's true, but the overall accuracy of kickers is much better now than it was when Mason Crosby was the kicker. The fact of the matter is, no kicker missed more kicks when you add extra points and field goals together than Anders Carlson did this year, whereas Mason Crosby was not in that situation during his first year as the Packers kicker. So it's not quite apples to apples when you're making that comparison. But he's got to be more accurate. He's got to be more consistent. The leg is there. The talent is there. He's got to deliver. And look, his brother went through the same thing. Hopefully, you end up with a situation where Rich Bisaccia, who did help his brother, can help Anders Carlson get to the next level.
And if he could be Daniel Carlson, and that would be awesome. If he could be Daniel, and the thing is, the Minnesota Vikings, they have some consistency right now with Greg Joseph, but overall, they probably wish they would have held on to Daniel Carlson. But he had 2 really, really bad weeks. He had a bad preseason, and Mike Zimmer at the time was just like, "Hey, you're done. You're out of here." And you just hope Anders Carlson can make that turn like Daniel Carlson did, and that's why. The Packers, they were hesitant to give up on him during the season last year. You didn't think that this team had possible Super Bowl potential right away, being the youngest team in, God, how long? Since the 2017 Cleveland Browns that didn't win a game. And a team that no one thought was going to make the playoffs in this first year of this youth movement. And now they just look like they've just gotten started, and it's very great, but you need a consistent kicker to make sure that doesn't stymie the progress that you've made from that first year. But another note, though, that we were talking on with Brian Gutekunst's presser on Tuesday in Indianapolis, where it sounds like Gutekunst is going to try to improve that quarterback room, just the depth behind Jordan Love. And if you look at it, it's smart, where Brian Gutekunst, remember, he comes from the Ron Wolf tree. Ron Wolf is all about the quarterback spot. You keep drafting, you keep signing, you keep looking for quarterbacks until you absolutely find your guy. That is the most important position. You got to be 100% certain that that's your guy. But there were so many injuries last year with quarterbacks. You had Rodgers with the Jets, Burrow with the Bengals, Cousins with the Vikings, Derek Carr missed time with the Saints, Deshaun Watson with Cleveland, Justin Herbert with the Chargers, Daniel Jones with the Giants, Anthony Richardson with the Colts. You got to make sure you got some insurance there, Gil. So that was interesting to hear, where Sean Clifford, he threw a lot of hospital balls in the preseason last year, and he looked pretty good and pretty confident. But his job as the number 2 quarterback isn't set in stone. I like that.
No, I like that too. And you look at some of the players that the Packers drafted late under Ron Wolf, Mark Brunell, Aaron Brooks,
Kurt
Ty
Warner.
Detmer. Some of those guys went on to some, Hasselbeck. I mean, some of those guys went on to Pro Bowls and playoff berths and did some really good things in the NFL. And what are you taking, a 5th, 6th, 7th round pick on these guys? It's worth it. You develop them. Sometimes you stash them on the practice squad, but a lot of the time they'd be backing up Brett Favre back in the day for 2-3 years. And then you trade them for, you spent a 6th round pick, you trade them for a 3rd round pick, and if something happens to your starting quarterback, you've got choices on your roster. So it makes sense. It's something that worked for this organization in the past, and I welcome returning to that idea.
And don't forget about my boy Matt Flynn. Hey, that guy set some records in Green Bay when he was quarterback, and he helped save their season during when Rodgers broke his collarbone the first time in 2013. Don't forget Matt Flynn too, Gil. Yeah. He shined when he got time in Green Bay. He earned $30 million in Seattle before he was essentially supplanted by Russell Wilson, who obviously very good career he's had, but. Yeah, the Packers, they got to get back to just drafting, developing, and just and making sure you can get something for those backup quarterbacks, especially if Jordan Love is your guy moving forward. Some other things that came up this week, though, that was released by the NFLPA. It was overall grades that players anonymously were voting on what works in their organization, what needs to improve, what has improved, et cetera, et cetera. The Packers, out of 32 teams, finished 3rd overall behind the Miami Dolphins and the Minnesota Vikings. The highest rankings among 32 teams. The team travel, they were 4th. Ownership and food / cafeteria, 6th. Weight room, they were 7th. Strength coaches, they were 8th. The lowest grade they had was a C+, which was 10th out of 32 teams, while the lowest rank they had was head coach for Matt LaFleur, but he still had a B+ grade, but was 21st overall. Gil, what is it about these grades? Take it with a grain of salt. It's kind of a good thing. What is it that stood out to you about these NFLPA grades, which is it's pretty good idea that this is public, because it's like it kind of inadvertently puts pressure on these organizations to get your stuff together, or else you're gonna fall behind essentially.
The thing that surprised me was, you mentioned that the Packers' lowest grade was for treatment of families, which was a C+.
Yeah.
But across the board, those grades were atrocious.
Yeah.
I mean, the Cincinnati Bengals actually got an F-. I don't even know how low you can go on that.
I think the LA Chargers got a bad one too, because
they had an F.
Yeah, they had a bad one too, because it kind of makes sense where they were charging players for daycare during game days, and someone made a point, very, very sarcastic. Was like, hey, if you had Philip Rivers in your organization with his 10 kids, yeah, you charge for daycare as well. So I kind of understand that, but still, you're an NFL organization. You can. These owners could pay for stuff like that. Sorry, Gil. Sorry, I interrupted Gil, but please
it's
keep
all
going.
Good. Across the board, the fact that those grades were so low, and we're here in 2024, that was a little bit of a concern. But overall, looking at the big picture, you got to be pleased when your team is that high in the rankings. And you could say what you want about, there's money, there's the state tax, there's the weather conditions, but having a high grade, top 5, top 6 overall in the NFLPA survey can't hurt when you're trying to attract free agents.
Oh, big time. And you got to think too, where it's funny, the Packers don't have a de facto owner. Mark Murphy, he's the closest thing to an owner that the Packers have, but 6th in ownership among 32 teams. I figured that'd be a little higher, but again, this is more so for the players, where a guy like a Jerry Jones will spend a lot of money and is willing to spend a lot of money. But for the Packers, from a community standpoint, living in Wisconsin, I love the Packers. I have I have stock in the Packers. Gil, I believe you have stock in the Packers as well. I know it's not real ownership. It's not real stock. And rival teams like to clown where it's like, oh, it's not even real. You're not a real owner. It means nothing. But guess what? If you want to invest in the team, you can invest in the team. They're not asking state tax. They're not asking taxpayers for extra money when they need stadium improvements, when they need renovations, whatever it may be. Guess what? It's not happening. They literally, if you want to support the team, you can support the team. You don't have to. It's honestly the best model, I think, in pro sports when it comes to that. Yet no one seems to recognize it because it's different than everybody else, and it's so unique. But I guarantee you, every fan base, if they really learn how beneficial that is to the state of Wisconsin and how beneficial that is to the taxpayer to not have to contribute millions of dollars in taxpayer money to a new stadium or stadium improvements, I think any team would want that model as well, Gil.
I think so too. And I also want to say, as an owner of the Green Bay Packers, I'm insulted that we were so low on that.
Still top 10. Hey, so still
no. We should be number one.
We should be. But that's not. But yeah, the players. Who knows? Players probably don't care about that. But if you have players who are living in Wisconsin,
right?
Hey, their taxes aren't going towards improving the team that they're employed by.
That's true.
So that's a good thing too. But another thing that stood out to me about those NFLPA grades, though, it was Matt LaFleur being the 21st ranked head coach. He had a B plus grade, which is really good. A lot of coaches had really good grades. I think the lowest grades were Josh McDaniels, Ron Rivera, coaches who
aren't there anymore.
They aren't there anymore. And for Josh McDaniels, obviously, it's like it hasn't worked twice, where it's becoming a pattern now. But a thing that I saw in there where Matt LaFleur, it said that players feel that Matt LaFleur is moderately willing to listen to the locker room, where it's something where the communication, and that could have been the Jair situation last year. That could have been the Devondre Campbell situation last year, where, hey, Matt LaFleur's got to communicate with these players better. If guys are unhealthy, they got to be willing to come to him. If guys have ideas, or if guys are have issues, or whatever it may be, Matt LaFleur's got to listen. They got to work together a little better. And it sounds like something where I think Matt LaFleur is the right coach, but he knows he's not someone who is set in his own ways. I feel like he's a coach who is flexible and is willing to adjust.
I think so too. And again, you hope one of the reasons they're going to do this survey is so, owners, coaches, people in positions of authority can look at this and say, oh, wow, we didn't do so well in this area. We got to work on it. And,
yep.
It's a message, and you send it anonymously. And I think overall it's a positive thing to have this published and to have F minus. How do you get an F minus?
Yeah, thank goodness the Packers aren't an F, lower than a C plus for anything.
Right, and that was in a category which that had them in the top 10. You said, I mean,
yeah, it was kind of unique. And it's interesting because the Packers too, and this whole NFLPA stuff. This is the baby of J.C. Tretter, who was a former Packer and just a brilliant guy. And he was he's an Ivy League graduate and everything. And he's obviously the right guy to lead the NFLPA for the foreseeable future and everything. And this is great, where this is obviously his baby. This is what he's doing. And he's helping improve the league for the players. And that's his job. With that, though, where, they were 10th, what was it, in taking care of families and everything like that. Yet they were one of 7 teams in the NFL that doesn't have daycare on game days, where I was listening to John Kuhn on the radio actually today. Obviously, everyone remembers Kuhn, former Packer legend, fan favorite, whatever you may call it. And he talked about where when he was with the Saints had daycare on game days, but his kids actually preferred to just be at home. They didn't like the daycare during the game. So, but that's interesting. But players do want that. So you got to think the Packers are willing. They're going to be willing to listen to that, especially after a few years ago where I know Aaron Rodgers isn't here anymore, but he almost retired. He wanted out of Green Bay. He made a big stink about, hey, it's about the people. It's about the people. It's about the people. And I think the Packers have improved since then. It seems like from the outside, but we really don't know. And the NFLPA grades help us give us a good look on the to see what's going on the inside and how well of an operation some teams are run, or how poor of an operation some teams are run.
You get to see behind the curtain a little bit, and that's always fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But we talk about the Packers though. They're legendary. They treat their players well. The grass is definitely greener, it seems like, to be in Green Bay as opposed to many other organizations. A Packer legend, Bart Starr, he passed away a few years ago. His wife, Cherry Starr, the widow of the Hall of Famer and Packers legend, died Tuesday at the age of 89, peacefully in Alabama. No cause of death was mentioned. But Bart Starr Jr., their son, told WBAY TV in Green Bay that Sherry has been battling cancer for years. Gil, what's your when you heard this news? I was crushed a little bit. It's really sad because Sherry Starr for me was essentially equivalent to the first lady of the NFL. I think that's the best way to put it.
She was part of the fabric of Green Bay and Wisconsin since the late 50s. I mean, we're going back to the Eisenhower administration, for crying out loud. Always involved with charity and always involved in the community. And she and Bart Starr were like inseparable. I have never
They were
met
high school
anybody.
Sweethearts. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they were probably just as in love at 80 as they were at 25.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a beautiful thing to say. I remember one of the last public appearances she made was when they honored Bart after he had passed away. And it just was very touching. She had class. She had dignity.
Yeah.
She was just a good person and so involved in so many charitable things. And, she and Bart were just a great team. And she will definitely be missed.
Yeah, and Cherry and Bart helped create the Star Children's Fund to help finance childhood cancer research. And Bart was the NFL's Man of the Year, the inaugural NFL Man of the Year, now the Walter Payton Man of the Year award in 1969. And Bart may have had his name on that plaque, but Cherry was every bit a part of that award, easily. It's just what they did for the communities, what they did for at-risk youth. It's just, you can go on and on. They were just the best people, just the shining example of what it means to be a Green Bay Packer. And it's just, she was everything to the Packers, everything from the start of Bart's time to the end of her time. She was everything in Green Bay. She did actually, I do have a quick story where she did come through. Her and Bart did a few years ago when I was still in television, a few years before Bart passed, and they were doing a charity event in the market I was working in. And I got to meet Cherry and I got to meet Bart. I got to talk to them for a little bit. Bart was just such a gentleman, such a great guy. Cherry was very sweet and kind, but she was a spitfire at the same time. And she was just hilarious and wonderful and just so quick-witted. And it was just, she reminded you of your Spitfire grandmother. That's the best way to put it. And they had security. They always had security with them too. And I remember talking with them, and I said to one of the security guards, Cherry's hilarious. It's like, oh man, you have no idea. Like, you have no idea how funny she is and how enjoyable this job is to be able to provide security for them. Where it's just, that says everything. That says everything. Where it's like those guys, they were dedicated to being their escorts, being their personal escorts. And I think it felt like a vacation probably every day for those security guards. I know it was very brief, but that's just the impression I got.
Yeah, I never had the privilege of meeting Cherry. I did meet Bart once, and it was an amazing experience. I met him for like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, but he made me feel like I was the most important person in the room, and I was a 14-year-old kid at the time. So it was a memorable experience for me. And I will say this, the fact that they are both now gone diminishes Green Bay and the community. Their impact will be felt years and years after their passing, but not having them there, something will be missing for a long, long time.
So much they've done in Alabama, so much they've done in Wisconsin. Just they essentially will live beyond their years, and what they've done will make an impact beyond their years. And they're reunited now. That's the shining. That's the best part about this, is that they're reunited now. So rest in peace, Cherry Starr. Just a wonderful, terrific woman. And sad news, but life goes on. Life is such, and her and Bart are reunited. That's the best part, Gil. And Gil, before we do wrap up with some trivia, what articles do you have coming up online for the Packers Post, for Cheesehead TV? Like you said, busy week, scouting combine, free agency just around the corner. What do we got cooking?
Well, for Cheesehead TV, I talked a little bit about the decision on Devondre Campbell. A lot of people saying maybe he should be let go. A lot of people saying we're short on linebackers. We need to keep him. So I tried to analyze the decision and break that down. I did a piece on the Packers Post that just talked about, here we are, the end of February. Where were we a year ago at the end of February, and just how much better things are for the organization in outlook and in attitude between 2024 and 2023 at the same time. So kind of, what a difference a year makes was the title of the article. And I think it really is a whole different ball game now than it was at, March 1st of 2023.
I think I have a much better taste in my mouth this time compared to last year. But maybe it's because I just ate some potato chips right before this. So who knows? But it's speaking of the Packers, though, I feel a lot better going into the next season than I did last year going into this past season, plain and simple. Gil, you ready for some trivia?
Let's go for it.
Well, we are recording on Thursday, February 29th. It's Leap Day. It comes once every 4 years. In honor of Leap Day, there are a few famous people with Leap Day birthdays, such as rap artist Ja Rule, motivational speaker Tony Robbins, late actor Dennis Farina, among others. And there's one former Packer who has a Leap Day birthday. He was a key defensive player in the early 90s for the Packers. Gil, who is this player who is celebrating a Leap Day birthday today on Thursday, February 29th?
I'm going on this is a guess because I do not know off the top of my head this answer. John Yurkovich.
It is not John Yurkovich. It is Bryce Paup. He turned 56 years old today, or 14 in leap year age. So Paup, as you remember, as Gil, you'll remember. I won't remember because I was a baby. I wasn't even born, and then I was I was a toddler when Paup was done in Green Bay. He played with the Packers from 1990 through 1994, registered 32 and a half sacks in his 5 years in Green Bay. So happy birthday, Bryce Paup. Hopefully you have a great 14th birthday celebration.
Yeah, I mean, how many birthdays on his actual birthday does he actually get?
Not many. My brother and my sister-in-law, they just had their third baby, but they had him on Wednesday, and they were so worried it was gonna be a Leap Day birthday. They're like, oh man, no, that'd be cool. That'd be so unique. That's what makes you.
Well, congratulations to them. So that's a very good thing.
I'll let them know. Hey, Uncle Gil says congrats at the baby.
There you go. All right. Well, that's going to do it for today. We'll be right back here next week. Follow us on Twitter at Gil Packers and at GB Packer Sean to stay up to date on all things Packers or to ask us questions. Or you can email us at gbpackersean@gmail.com. Make sure you're subscribed to Packers Talk on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, you can also find us now on YouTube. Big thanks to PackersTalk.com for powering our show. And thank you for listening. Until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.